So let's begin. So VRP, operating system image management. So the particular file that is the operating system of a Huawei switch or router is normally referred to as an image. An image. So we want to see how we can be able to do things like upgrade of a VRP operating system, how we can do backup, how we can do recovery using either FTP or TFTP. So that is what this topic is about. So I'll read the foreword. Effective network administration and management within an enterprise network relies on all devices maintaining backup files. In the event of system failures or other events that may result in loss of important system files and data. So remote servers that use the file transfer protocol service are often used to ensure files are maintained for backup and retrieval purposes as and when needed. The means for establishing communication with such application services is introduced in this section. By the end of this chapter, you should be able to. A volunteer, please. Anyone who's not spoken since morning?
Upon completion of this section.
Who is this?
Gathudi.
Oh, Gathudi. Please go ahead.
Upon completion of this section, you'll be able to explain the importance of maintaining up-to-date version of VRP.
Yes.
To establish a client relationship with FTP server. Successful upgrade of VRP system image.
Exactly. So let's see how to do that. So sometimes you might want a new version of a VRP in order to support the new features of that particular VRP, and VRPs will be upgraded in order to cater for changes in technology. So changes in technology might be changes in protocol. For example, we moved, or we are still moving from IP version 4 to IP version 6. So you might really need a VRP that will be able to understand IP version 6 if you need to deploy IP version 6 within your network. It's also used to support new advancement in the hardware. It's also used to support, of course, improved. Of course, these are changes in technology like security, new security features, and so on and so forth. So generally, sometimes you might have your router like an AR2220 router, and it might have a VRP that you want to upgrade. So for example, this particular version is called, whatever you're having right now is version 5.90. We want to upgrade it to version 5.160. So most of the time, these particular versions will have this number here, V200R001C000. So just to mention, when we have V, so you can have VXXX, so that is a number. This one is used to give us the product version. The product version, or the product code. The product code. Then RXXX, for example, R001, is used to give us what we call the major version. major version number. Then when we have also the CXXS set, then it means that this is a minor version release number, like that. So as you can see from this particular example, the product code is 200. The major version release is 001. Whatever we are using was 001. Now we are upgrading it to 007. Then the CC at the C, at the minor version release, we have 00 because this is not a minor version. This is a major version release. So that's why we're having 00. So in case it was a minor version release, then at that particular point, at the RXXX, we will have all zeros. Then here we will have a certain number. Okay. So these are some of the files that we might need to back up or to retrieve from what we call an FTP server. So we have our router. Our router has several files. For example, some of the files that our routers have: the VRP image file, that is the operating system, the configuration file that has the specific file that has the specific settings for our router. Then we have the log files. The log file is used to keep track of everything that happens in the router. A footprint, especially of what users do within your router. We might also have files like this license file that allows you to use that particular operating system, and other files like patch files, etc., etc. So as we saw in the foreword, some of these files are very important, and it is always a good practice to back them up in a location that is different from the router's storage device, because there are certain circumstances that can make us lose these files. For example, you might accidentally use the format command and erase your flash memory where these files have been stored. Or your router can be hacked, maybe, just as an example, and someone deletes a particular file. Or someone who actually has the access can actually delete a configuration file accidentally, or a log file accidentally. So when those things happen, they're going to affect your network operation. And in order to ensure that you can be able to recover from that downtime as quickly as possible, it is recommended that you back up your files in what we call an FTP server, a file transfer protocol server. So with the FTP server, you can be able to send files to the server. You can also be able to retrieve files from the server. For example, when you want to do a VRP upgrade, you can store it in your server, then remotely you can be able to transfer it to your router. So these are some of the things that we are going to learn in this particular chapter. So we have two file transfer modes that we can use, methods that we can use. The first one is called the file transfer protocol, and the next one here is called the trivial file transfer protocol. Sorry, like that. So the major difference between FTP and TFTP is that FTP uses, on the transport layer, FTP uses TCP. On the other hand, this one uses UDP. UDP. So from the previous chapter, you understand the difference between the operation of TCP and UDP. And for example, when you're using TFTP, you cannot be able to do things like authentication because you don't need to form a connection before you start sending or retrieving files from the FTP server. The other thing you need to note is that both FTP and TFTP use what we call a client-server model. So while this is the server, your router is actually the client. So the client can make requests to the server. And when that is happening, TFTP actually, or FTP generally, uses TCP ports, FTP TCP ports 20 and port 21. So I think there's a topic about FTP and TFTP, which we are going to, about FTP, which we're going to learn later. So this one, port 20 is used for what we call data transmission. So for transferring the data. On the other hand, this one is used for the control, to maintain the connection. So those are the two ports that are commonly used by FTP. So with FTP, you have to begin with a three-way handshake. You remember the three-way handshake? In order to establish a TCP connection. Then after that, you can now send the request and the server will send an acknowledgement. So you can send a request either to transfer or to retrieve a file. With TFTP, you don't need to form any connection. You simply send a request to the server to either retrieve or upload a file, and the server will send you an acknowledgement. And once you get the acknowledgement, then you can begin sending or retrieving that particular file. So those are the differences between these particular methods, TFTP and FTP. So let's see. How can we retrieve a file from the FTP server? For example, here we want to do an upgrade of our VRP. So we want to upgrade our VRP. So that VRP file has been stored in our FTP server. We want to pull it from the FTP server to our router. Now, the very first thing you need to ensure is what we call reachability. So you need the reachability between the client, who is your router, and the server, who is your FTP server. So to do that, of course, you must configure the IP address so that they are either on the same network, if it's within your local area network, and if your FTP server is remote, for example, on the cloud, at least from your router, you should be able to ping it. So there should be a path, a forwarding path from your router all the way to your cloud server or your remote server. But if it's in your local area network, they should at least be able to ping each other. So you should be able to ping the server, excuse me, from your router and vice versa. So that's why here we are going into RTA. So the first thing we are doing is just renaming on system view, we rename RTA. Then we configure that interface. We go into that interface and we configure an IP address 10.1.1.1/24. So you can either do the full version of the subnet mask like 255.255.255.0, or you can do this one, the short code. So really it depends on your preference, but both will work. So after that, you can confirm reachability by doing a ping. We already learned about the ping. So after you've done that, the next thing you need to check is to check whether you have space in your storage device. So how to do that? You use the dir command. Now it should be able to display the number of files that are there, and at the very bottom of that list you should see the total size of your flash memory and the space you're remaining with. So in case this space is less than the file that you need to retrieve from the FTP server, the VRP file you need to retrieve, you can simply delete the old VRP file. And remember to use the delete the unreserved command so that it doesn't go to the recycle bin, because if it goes to the recycle bin, it still occupies your flash memory space. So use the delete unreserved, then it should be able to delete that particular old VRP file. So once you have enough space, you can now go ahead and retrieve the file from the FTP server. How do you do that? On your router, you type the command FTP. Remember here we are on user view. So you type the command FTP and then the IP address of the server. So as you can see here, what is happening here is the TCP handshake. So it's gonna try. Then after exchanging the TCP segments, they're gonna form the connection. So now they are connected. And after that, one advantage of FTP compared to TFTP is that you can actually configure authentication. So they have to give a username and a password. And once you provide the correct password, and here when you're typing the password, nothing really shows, but just keep typing the password, especially in the practical. When you're done, just press enter. If it's correct, it's gonna tell you, it's gonna now get you, it's gonna change the prompts into FTP from RTA. You see here it was RTA. We're gonna change it to FTP. Then now, you can use the command get, then the name of that file in your FTP server. Kenneth, you have a question? Go ahead.
The password is still Huawei or?
Password required. The username is Huawei. Password we don't know, but okay. in the lab you should be told. Most likely they use both Huawei.
Okay.
But in the lab you should actually be told.
Okay. So.
So the name of this file, the name and the location of the file should now be entered after the command get. So get vrp.cc. Now, file type formats. Now we have two major file type formats. The first one is called ASCII, and the next one is called binary. So sometimes you have to set the file format that is supposed to be used to retrieve the file. Generally, ASCII is used for text files. On the other hand, binary is used for image files, and video na vitu kama hiyo, program files. So binary. So with binary, data is sent byte by byte. On the other hand, with ASCII, it actually converts your text file into what we call an 8-bit ASCII. So ASCII, I think, is American standard for something. I can't remember the full name, But just know that these are the two commonly used file formats for FTP. So in particular, your VRP image files should always be retrieved in binary mode. So don't forget that. They should be used, you should use the binary mode because it's not a text file. It's an image file or a program file, something like that. Okay. So when we are using TFTP, in the previous slide we've used FTP. Now here we want to use trivial. We can just do the command in a single line like this because we don't need any connections, we don't need any authentication. So we simply type TFTP, the address of the server, then get, then the name, the location and name of the file we want to retrieve from the TFTP server. So that's how TFTP is quite easy and fast, but also has some security risk. Now, after you've downloaded your VRP image into your router, the next thing you need to do is to configure it using the command startup system software so that you can configure it to be the next startup system software. So startup system software, then space, then the name of that file that you've just retrieved from your server. Now, if you type the command display startup, you should be able to see that what had been configured earlier to start up was this. What was used to start up was this. But in the next startup, we are going to use this vrp.cc. So now, in order for that to take effect, you have to restart your device using the command reboot. Excuse me. Okay. So ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of this particular chapter. At this particular point, I think someone can volunteer and answer the first question. Then another person can volunteer and handle the next question. Anyone to go first? A volunteer? Okay, let me choose Kenneth for the first one. Kichinda, help us with the first one, please.
What should be configured
Yes.
on the client in order to establish a connection with an FTP server? Okay, let someone else answer that one for me.
That's okay, that's okay. Anyone to help us answer that question?
Yeah. Okay, let me try. I think you should configure an IP address.
Exactly. So that the server is reachable from the client. So that is correct. Someone else to go for the next question there? Joshua, are you there? Nyandwaro?
Yeah, I'm around.
Help us with the next question there.
Okay, how can have taken effect after a reboot of the device?
So how can a user confirm?
Okay. Okay, I think the details are in the main board.
Which
something like
command?
that.
Which command can they enter in order to see the next startup system software?
It's startup. Startup to validate.
The command is display startup. Eh?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so how can a user confirm
Hello?
that changes?
The display
Is it
startup.
the current?
Hello? You can hear me, guys? Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, so this is that command. Eh? You see here, we've configured a different VRP to run in the next startup using the command startup system software. So to see that, or to confirm that, we use the command display startup. So we can be able now to see that indeed in our next startup we are going to use that particular software. So that particular file, I'm sorry. So thank you very much. That is it.